I think Bob said that he was not going to engage in the analysis. He was not going to make a determination one way or the other. We analyzed the law and the facts, and a group of us spent a lot of time doing that and determined that both as a matter of law, many of the instances would not amount to obstruction.
All right, joining me now for further analysis on Barr's comments and some other legal matters are Kevin Chavis. He's an attorney and the managing partner at the Chavis Group, also a Democratic strategist. Here in studio with me, Kenneth Vecchio, a GOP strategist who is also a lawyer. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us. Kevin, let's start with you. What do you make of Barr's comments? Do you think he was right?
Well, a couple of things stood out to me, Michelle. One, at one point in the interview, he talked about how society's gotten so hyper-political that his use of the word spying, set people off into a tizzy. But he's doing this interview and he's making very political statements himself. Like you said, he's not shying away from the attention that this spectacle has brought his way.
But on the legal issues, Kevin, do you think that Barr was right on the legal issue? Because he was making reference to the point that you either charge someone or you don't charge someone. You either find someone guilty or not guilty. You don't find someone not innocent. And we know that Mueller went out of his way saying that, quote, if we had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. Barr said that that was an unusual statement to make. Was he right? That's not a legal standard.
Well, I think what was also unusual, this whole situation's been unusual, frankly, but for Attorney General Barr to release the statement summarizing the report rather than releasing the report was also
Kevin,
unusual.
what was wrong with that?
It also impacted
Kevin, it was totally proper.
Well, because he mischaracterized.
Hold on a second. Let me respond for a second. The American public wanted to hear about this immediately. Under the law, they couldn't give the entire report. Barr did what was just and what was correct, and he summarized the report appropriately. The special counsel found that there was absolutely no collusion whatsoever between the Trump campaign and Russian operatives. More so, he refused to prosecute on obstruction of justice. That's what prosecutors do. They either prosecute or they decline to prosecute. Mueller, for whatever his reasons, threw up his hands, and Barr did the firm and just thing. He analyzed it, and he determined that there was absolutely no evidence for an obstruction case. And this entire notion by Robert Mueller that I decided that, I couldn't exonerate him, that's not a prosecutor's role. A prosecutor simply says, I prosecute or don't prosecute. And this whole non-exoneration thing is way blown out of proportion. 5 people walk into a building and a car blows up with a bomb, and the government says, well, I don't know which one of them did it. They can't exonerate any 5 of them, but guess what? There's a presumption of innocence for all of them if they don't have the sufficient evidence to prosecute. Don't you agree with me?
Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I would say that Barr, for one thing, Robert Mueller had a job that was different than a lot of prosecutors because he had to do a lot of the investigation. For a lot of prosecutors, the defendants are already named, and then they step in to then file charges. In this case, we didn't know how expansive the interference into the 2016 election was. Mueller had to do a lot of that himself. That's why he had a big staff underneath him that involved former intelligence agencies. So he was doing a lot of investigation. And then for Attorney General Barr to come out and make a determination on obstruction when he then said he didn't even look at the evidence, you're a lawyer. How do you make a determination on whether someone didn't commit a crime?
Kevin, Barr did, in that interview, as he has in the past, defended that 4-page summary, saying that, he didn't plan on issuing a summary, but it was taking a long time to get the necessary redactions. There was this insatiable need from the media and the public to know what is in this report. So he did that as an interim step. The media was just clamoring for something. He said quite clearly that it was never intended to capture the full flavor and essence of the report.
Absolutely correct, Michelle. And Barr did what a boss is supposed to do. He evaluated his underlings' report and determined with Rod Rosenstein that there were no crimes, that there was nothing to prosecute. That's what a boss does. Yes, Robert Mueller, highest level of a prosecutorial position, except for the Attorney General. And I don't know what you're talking about, that he did a lot of investigation, and this is unusual. I'm a former prosecutor and a former judge. I believe that you have the same type of credentials. We understand that prosecutorial agencies at that level, they necessarily do investigation. That's part of their job, and that's why he had several underlings, not only lawyers, but agents.
Right,
right,
they
go
do,
ahead,
but the defendant has been named typically. The defendant has been named once a prosecutor then steps in to file charges against the defendant.
That's not true. That's not always true. That's why there's grand juries. That's why there's grand juries convened.
Right.
Defendants aren't always named. That's the whole basis of an investigative grand jury.
All right, let's focus on something else that Barr said. And he made the point in this interview that we should all be disturbed that there was potential interference in the democratic process, that the American public and the media should be worried about the idea of there being resistance to a democratically elected president. Let's take a listen.
I think one of the ironies today is that people are saying that it's President Trump that's shredding our institutions. I really see no evidence of that. From my perspective, the idea of resisting a democratically elected president and basically throwing everything at him and really changing the norms on the grounds that we have to stop this president. That's where the shredding of our norms and our institutions is occurring.
Kevin, wouldn't Democrats also want to know if there's this process where a democratically elected president is essentially undermined by what at least the president refers to as the deep state?
Well, absolutely. We would want to know if we have members in our own intelligence that are trying to undermine our democratically elected leaders. But again, we're getting mixed messages from the Trump administration here. On one hand, they say we need to move on from the Mueller administration, and the country's been bruised by this. This has been unprecedented presidential harassment, and let's move on to doing real work on behalf of American people. But now we've got Attorney General Barr saying he wants to investigate the investigators. Well, we'll see if that investigation leads to 34 indictments. We'll see if it leads to almost $50 million in asset forfeitures. We'll see if it uncovers a sweeping and systematic interference on behalf of or committed by American intelligence on presidential campaigns. I have serious doubts that it will. And Barr, again, I think is being very dangerous by saying we should fear American interference more than foreign interference. It downplays what Mueller, or as much as, he said it's an equal threat. American interference is an equal threat to foreign interference. Well, isn't it? I think that's a very political statement without evidence. Is it perhaps even a more problematic threat, Kevin, if it's coming from within? Is that not even more disturbing? Well, I think they would both be very disturbing, but we've got evidence based on the Mueller report that there was a very sweeping effort on behalf of the Russians.
Kevin, we even saw
some of it in 2018.
We don't have.
So we'll see what comes out, I guess.
All right. Give him a chance to finish that statement, please. Kevin, finish that statement, please.
Well, no, I was just going to say that we'll see what comes of this investigation, that now that all this information has been declassified, I just don't think we'll uncover nearly the same amount of damage that the Mueller investigation uncovered.
Which still showed that there was no conspiracy to collude with the Russians.
Right, and we have very little evidence that there was real Russian interference in our election that made any change whatsoever in the results. In fact, there's 0.0 evidence of it. The investigation that you're talking about with all these indictments and so forth, Kevin, really amounted to nothing from what the investigation was intended to find. It was very minimalistic charges that were filed that usually would result in straight probation, not in criminal convictions that require imprisonment. And there was really, I mean, we're talking about the lowest level of Russian interference that involved in our election.
Okay, agreed, Ken. But to Kevin's point, is this yet another waste of taxpayers' money? Just to play that side of the argument, should Republicans let this go now?
For years, investigators have been looking at other investigators, the good cops looking at the bad cops, and most of the time they just let it go unless it rises to a certain level of criminality by the other people in law enforcement. I happen to be of the belief, and I've said it several times on the air, let everybody just walk into the sunset now. Bob Mueller, even Hillary Clinton, leave them all alone. Let's move on, America. So I do agree with Kevin there. Let's just move on. Now, certain types of criminal acts that could have occurred, like interfering with people's civil liberties in these FISA warrants that were had without probable cause, I think that should be investigated.
All right. Thank you so much, Kendall Vecchio, Kevin Chavis. Appreciate your perspectives.